Oh, hi there. I'm the storyteller. Today I'm going to tell you a story. The story today is how the badger got his stripes. In the great long ago, the badger was pure white all over. How sorry I feel for the bear with his dull brown coat, the badger would say. And who would like to be a leopard, all covered in spots, or worse still, a tiger with its vulgar striped coat? I am glad that I was given this pure white coat without a blemish on it. This is how the badger would boast as he paraded through the forest, until all the other creatures were thoroughly sick and tired of him. After all, nobody likes a boaster. He always looked down his nose at me, said the rabbit, because only my tail is white. And he sneers at me, said the field mouse, because I'm such a mousy colour. And he calls me an eyesore, exclaimed the zebra. It's time we put a stop to it, they all said. Then may I make a suggestion, asked the fox, as he was the clever one, and he outlined a plan for which the other animals agreed. Some time later, the fox went to the badger and he said, "Oh, badger, please help us. You are without a doubt the best looking creature in the wild wood. It is not just your coat, which is exceedingly beautiful and without a blemish, but it is also, oh, the way you walk on your hind legs, the way you hold your head up, your superb manners and your graceful ways. Won't you help us humbler animals by giving us lessons in how to improve our looks and how to carry ourselves?" Well, the badger was thrilled to hear all of this compliment, and he replied very graciously, "Oh, of course, my dear fox. I'll see what I can do." So the fox called all the animals to meet in the great glade, and he said to them, "Badger here has agreed to give us lessons in how to look as handsome as he does. He will also instruct us in etiquette, deportment, and fashion." There were one or two sniggers amongst the smaller animals at this point, but the badger didn't notice. He stood up on his hind legs. He puffed up with pride, he put his nose in the air and said, "I am very happy to be in a position to help you less fortunate animals, and I must say I can see much room for improvement. You, wolf, for instance, have a very shabby coat." "But it's the only one I've got," said the wolf. "And I pity you, beaver," went on the badger. "With such an extraordinary pelt you have, and as for that ridiculous tail—" "Badger," interrupted the fox, "rather than going through all of our shortcomings, interesting and instructive they may be, why don't you teach us how to walk with your nose in the air? The way you make yourself look so distinguished, and it just sets off that beautiful white coat so well." "By all means," said the badger. "Why not walk to the other end of the glade so we can all see?" said the fox. "Certainly," said the badger. And so, without suspecting a thing, he began to walk to the other end of the glade. Now, if the badger had not been listening so blindly to his own self-satisfaction, he might have noticed the rat and the stoat and the weasel smirking behind their paws. If he'd looked a little closer, he might have even noticed a twinkle in many an animal's eye. But he didn't. He just swaggered on his hind legs, with his nose right up in the air, saying, "This is the way you walk. Notice how graceful I am. Notice my hind legs. See how I'm awfully careful to keep..." This is the moment that the badger discovered a trap. The fox had a plan. The fox had all of the other animals to dig a deep pit at the end of the great glade. This they had filled with muddy water and madder root, and covered it with branches and ferns. The badger with his nose in the air, had, of course, walked right into it, feet first. And he sank right in, up to his neck. "Help!" he cried. "Help, my beautiful white coat! Please, someone help me out!" Well, of course, all of the other animals in the glade laughed and pointed at the poor badger as he struggled to keep his head out of the muck. Eventually, he pulled himself out by his own efforts. When the badger looked down at his beautiful white coat, it was stained with mud and madder root. He was so mortified that he ran off out of the forest with a pitiful howl, and he ran and he ran and he ran until he came to a crystal clear lake. There, he tried to clean the stuff off his coat, but the madder root is a powerful dye, and no matter what he did, he could not get it off. "What shall I do?" he moaned to himself. "My beautiful white coat, my pride and my joy ruined forever. How can I hold my head up in the forest again?" To make matters worse, at that moment, a creature whom the badger had never seen before swam up to him and said, "What are you doing, washing your filthy old coat in our crystal clear lake? Push off." The badger was speechless, not only because he wasn't used to being spoken to like this, but also because the creature had such a beautiful coat. It was as white and unblemished as the badger's coat used to be. "Who are you?" asked the badger. "I'm a swan, of course," replied the swan. "Now shove off. We don't want dirty creatures like you around here." And the swan rose up on its hind legs and beat its powerful wings, and the badger slunk away on all fours with his tail between his legs. For the rest of that day, the badger hid himself away in a grove overlooking the crystal lake. From there he gazed down at the white swan gliding proudly about the lake, and the badger was so filled with bitterness and envy that he thought he would burst. That night, however, he stole down to the swan's nest when the swan was fast asleep, and very, very gently, he pulled out one of the swan's feathers and scuttled back to his hiding place. He did the same thing the next night, and the next, and the next, and each night he returned to the grove where he was busy making himself a beautiful coat of white feathers to cover up his stained fur. And because the badger did this so slowly and slyly, the swan never noticed, until all but one of his feathers had disappeared. That night the swan couldn't sleep because of the draught from where his feathers were missing, and so it was that he saw the badger creeping up to steal the last feather. As he did so, the swan rose up with a terrible cry. He pecked off the badger's tail and beat him with his wings and chased him off. Then the swan returned to the crystal lake and sat there, lamenting over his lost feathers. When the fox came along by the lake and found the badger, "Hello, Meggsy," he found the swan sitting there, bald and featherless, and he was extremely surprised. But he was even more surprised when he went to the wood and found the badger parading around, looking quite ridiculous in his stolen feather coat. "Badger," explained the fox, "I knew you were vain, but I didn't know you were a thief as well." And there and then he took the feathers and gave them back to the swan. "From this day on," he said to the badger, "you will wear only your coat stained with madder root, and if you're going to steal, I better give you a thief's mask as well." And the fox drew his fingers across the badger's eyes and left him with 2 black stripes, like a mask, from ears to snout. The badger was so ashamed that he ran off and hid, and to this very day, all badgers avoid company. They live in solitude, stealing a bit here and there wherever they can, and each and every badger still wears a mask of stripes across his eyes. Thank you for listening. That is how the badger got his stripes.